Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Cindy Meyer, and I work for Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District. And with me this morning is...
Hi, I'm Dylan Schmer. You're not going to be able to see me through the current screen viewing. I will be on the side panel here. Our mics kind of clash when I have mine on, but I am a district technician. Over here at the office, I'll be helping with any ag outreach or any ag questions that you guys will have in the future. So you guys can reach me here at the office too. And then for questions too, if you guys could hold those to the end, like we did say earlier, or put them in the chat box, I will be monitoring that.
Yep, so again, if you have any comments or any questions for Aaron during the presentation or any of us, like Dylan said, please put that in the chat box and we'll wait till the end to do that. But this morning, I really, this is the second in our series for the 2021 Ag Chats. And I'm really excited to talk about the Blanchard River demonstration farms. With us today, though, we've got Ashley Rose, and this series is sponsored by the Warren County Farm Bureau. So we're really happy to have Ashley with us and have them sponsor for us. Ashley, you had a couple words this morning?
Sure. So good morning, everyone. Like Cindy said, I'm Ashley Rose. I'm the organization director for Clinton, Fayette, Greene, and Warren County Farm Bureaus. We're super excited to partner with Soil and Water. They're a great partner of us, and they're always willing to really question us about what farmers need to hear and what they want to learn about. And we always use their resources and their knowledge to help spread the message. So we're always very thankful for that partnership. This week in the World of Farm Bureau, we're coming up on what we're deeming Ag Week. We're going to talk to legislators about key issues that are important to us. Some of those issues are going to be about the COVID recovery as we continue through this pandemic. How do we make sure that we get small businesses back open? How do we make sure that farmers stay in business? Excuse me, I'm a little froggy this morning. We're also going to talk about food supply chain improvements and how we can do that here in the state of Ohio. Just that way we don't have the same issues we had at the beginning of the pandemic. Rural broadband, which is not a surprise to anyone who has lived 5 minutes in this pandemic, that's a key issue for us. And then also, that continued funding as we go into the budget year for the state when it comes to ODA, when it comes to OSU extension, soil and waters, funding things like the H2 Ohio program. We were so thankful that Governor DeWine had really thought that to be a priority in the past, and we want to continue that project going forward. So we're going to advocate on that behalf. We're also going to talk to our legislators a lot about, that rural mental health piece. Rural mental health has been an issue in small counties for quite a number of years. I think the pandemic, just like rural broadband, has really brought it to life. Just how many people really just kind of struggle, not having necessarily the resources to know how to cope properly. So we're going to make sure that we advocate on behalf of that and farm stress. And then another thing that we're really excited is coming up is our membership day. So if you're a Farm Bureau member and you need to renew your membership, if you come to Rural King in Lebanon on March 13th from 9 a.m. to noon, turn your membership into us, we'll turn around and give you a $10 gift card to a local business. So we're really excited about that opportunity. We've never done that before, and it's had a great response so far. So we're really excited. And of course, anything that you need from Farm Bureau, you can always reach out to my office. So thanks, Cindy. I'll turn it back to you.
Yep, thanks, Ashley. That's exciting. So this morning, I also wanted to take a little bit of time to just mention that we've got a couple things happening right now. I do want to just mention too, that March 12th, we do have that last final Ag Chat for the year, cover crops for soil health. So if you're interested in cover crops, join us at 9 a.m. It's the same Zoom instructions that you had for this. So just join us for that if you want to learn about cover crops. And then also our tree sale is happening now, which everybody always looks forward to our tree sale. Last year we weren't able to have it, so we're pretty excited that in 2021 it's returned. So we need all of our orders in by March 17th. You can do this all online, and there's our website, warrenswcd.com, for more information on the cover crops program as well as that tree sale. And that order form is all there on that website. So in reference though to this presentation that we have this morning, I did want to mention that even though, we may think that the demonstration farms are north of us and it may not pertain to us, it could very easily pertain to us. And I did want to mention that in the Cedar Creek watershed, we've formed a Cedar Creek collaborative. And there's multiple partners involved in this group. Our mission really is to protect and maintain soil health and water quality in that Cedar Creek watershed. And so by forming this group and working on specific plans in this watershed, we will perhaps be able to take advantage of grants and other available monies like H2 Ohio that Ashley mentioned that may come down the pike to benefit our farms in that watershed. So some of the items today that you hear about from Aaron might be available to some of the farms in that Cedar Creek watershed in the near future. So keep that in mind when you're listening to Aaron this morning, and let us know if you're interested. You could be interested in volunteering with us on the collaborative. You could live in the area and you might be interested in just voicing your opinion. You can do that. You can call us and talk to us about this initiative, or you can visit our website and we've got a survey there on the Cedar Creek collaborative webpage that you can actually go in and answer some general questions about what you're seeing in that watershed and what you'd like to see happen in the watershed, or simply just give some comments. So either way, call us or visit the website and take that short survey. But our website is warrenswcd.com. So without further ado, Aaron Heilers is with us this morning, and he's going to talk about the Blanchard River Demonstration Farms project. And Aaron is the project manager for the Blanchard River Demonstration Farms Network. So we're excited to have Aaron with us. So Aaron, we'll get your PowerPoint up.
All right, I think you have to stop sharing your screen.
Yes. There you go.
All right, can you see that?
Sure can.
All right, well, thanks everybody, and thanks to Warren County for inviting me to come talk today on the Demonstration Farms Network. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of the Demonstration Farm project, and then talk about the practices, the research going on, the practices, things of that nature, and by all means ask questions. I know they'd like to do questions at the end, but throw them up there and I'll try to answer anything that I can. So this is just a nice little shot of our one of our demonstration farms after a waterway was put in. You'll see this picture later in the presentation, but we try to use some kind of innovative tools to be able to capture conservation and showcase it in a little bit different way. I should say that I'm from Shelby County. I farm here with my family. Worked at Soil and Water in Auglaize County and Miami County for about 10 years before starting this project. So, very well versed in the conservation world. I write nutrient management plans on the side as well. So do a lot of stuff in conservation. On my farm here, corn, soybean operation, strictly no-till, have been doing cover crops for about 8 years now. So really believe in the conservation effort. And that helps when we're talking to groups out on the farms about things that we can do as farmers. So a little bit of background. The Demonstration Farms is a partnership between Ohio Farm Bureau and USDA and RCS. So you guys are very familiar with those organizations, but we actually started, 6 years ago now, 2015, I think. Came through the first 5-year contract and just signed a new 5-year contract to keep the project going and expand. So, as a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here, we're focused on water quality and ag's impact on that water quality. So, it may look like I didn't finish my PowerPoint here, but it's kind of the joke of any presentation I give at this point is, what photo of green water are you going to put in here now? I mean, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. It looks really, really bad, and usually that finger of blame is pointed right back at agriculture. So up in the Western Lake Erie Basin, we're focused on what you see here, which is phosphorus. If you look at those three different components there, you've got total phosphorus on the left. You've got particulate, which is phosphorus that's bound to the soil sediment, and then dissolved phosphorus, or DRP is what we call it. And that DRP is what the research is pointing to as the main culprit in these algal blooms that we're having on Grand Lake St. Mary's, Lake Erie. I mean, all around the world, frankly. In the last couple of years, these algal blooms have really taken off. But nitrogen is a big player as well. What they've been telling us lately is that phosphorus dictates how big the bloom is, but nitrogen dictates how toxic it is. So, you know, if you go into any backyard pond in the middle of summer, chances are you're going to see some algae on it. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. It's just, you know, stagnant water, things start to grow, nutrient-rich environment. The problem with this particular strain of algae is that apparently when it gets fed a certain strain of or amount of nitrogen, then it turns toxic, and that's what harms humans, harms animals, and that's really the big human health issue that we're dealing with. So we're looking at phosphorus, but down there where you guys are at, you know, in the Gulf of Mexico, issues are more nitrogen driven, but honestly, in Lake Erie, they farm just about the same way you guys do. They use the same fertilizers, and nitrogen's a big issue up there too. It's not the one that leads the discussion all the time. So the demonstration farms, as you can see here on this map, kind of where we're located in the Western Basin. Where I sit in Shelby County is right on the Continental Divide, going either way. So the Blanchard watershed is up around Findlay. Kenton is right on the divide as well, Hancock, Hardin County. And you can see our three farms, they're the Statler, Kellogg, and Kirk farms. A little close-up view of it here, so you can see where they're scattered throughout in the watershed. And let's see, I don't know if I've got a let's pull up a pointer here, maybe it might help me throughout the. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but you know where they're located at. I see a thumbs up. Thanks for that. There we go. So the three farms that we started out working with are highlighted here. Just real quick, Kellogg Farms is about 5,000 acres of corn and soybeans. You see Bill and Shane Kellogg there, just a family operation. The middle picture is the Statlers, Dwayne and Anthony. They're up over 1,000 acres of cropland now, but they are about 7,000 head of wean to finish swine. Actually, I should say that differently. They've got a nursery, and then they feed their two finisher barns on the same site. So a large livestock operation. And then Chris Kurt on the right there, he is he's actually a president of a bank in Kenton, and he farms about 400 to 500 acres of corn and soybeans. So when we set this project up, we wanted to kind of get the cross section of agriculture in Northwest Ohio. You know, obviously you can find different types of farm, vegetable farms and fruit farms and all that stuff, livestock operations. But traditionally, you're going to have that small operator. You're going to have that really, really big operator. And then you're going to have that large livestock operator. And so when we give tours and talk about the conservation practices, we can kind of cut across all those different types of farmers and say, okay, you know, this practice makes sense for somebody at this scale. But when you start getting to a smaller scale, maybe it's just not financially feasible for them to implement that practice. And that helps us when we bring in the non-farm public who aren't familiar with agriculture, and they just want all farmers to do everything. You can have that conversation about, you know, why it may not make economic sense for them to do it. So it's, and then the livestock, frankly, I don't know what it is down your guys' way, but, you know, in Northwest Ohio, manure gets the finger pointed right at them. Any big CAFO, I mean, it is their front page news. And they definitely are targeted. So having the ability to bring those groups in and stand inside that hog barn and look at the animals and have the discussion really changes people's minds on why things are done the way they are. They may not agree with it completely, but at least they understand that, these guys aren't, they're not bad people. They're raising livestock. They're managing the nutrients. This is how we do it. It's a good conversation. So if you look at our goals down in there at the bottom, showcasing traditional and innovative conservation practices that have a positive impact on water quality. That's the high level 30,000 foot view of what we're trying to do. And then the two subsets of that is increasing farmers' confidence in implementing these practices that we're talking about. It's great to say that this practice reduces phosphorus, runoff and nitrogen runoff or leaching, but if a farmer doesn't feel like they can actually accomplish it, then we haven't solved anything. And if we force them to do it, then that's not helpful either. It's better if the farmer takes it on themselves and learns and teaches their neighbors. So we're trying to do that. And the second part of that is being a trusted resource for the general public. So the first 3 to 4 years before the pandemic kind of shut us down last year, we did a lot of tours with just community organizations that are concerned about the water in the area. And again, we can come to these different types of farms and they can talk to the farmer themselves. They don't have to listen to me. They can ask them those pointed questions, and it really works out pretty well. You can see the picture there on the right is of the news media, trying to make sure that the news is being reported, fairly or accurately. That's a big thing that we focused on as well. So we'll kind of dive into some of the research and the practices here. Kind of the backbone of what we do, or the recommendations that we make is based off of the USDA Ag Research Service Edge of Field research network. You can see on the map here, I don't know if it shows up in that kind of that darker blue color, the small dots, those are the Edge of Field research sites scattered throughout Northwest Ohio. So just a couple kind of around Columbus, but the rest are predominantly up in the Western Lake Erie Basin. And that's what the sites look like. You can see here they've got 20 paired field sites, and that number kind of changes seasonally. Some of these sites go away, some new ones come on. But each site, as it says, is a pair. So 2 fields, usually side by side, that are being monitored. And we'll start off with those fields being kept exactly the same. So, for 2 or 3 years, whatever the crop cycle is, those fields will get exactly the same management across them. And typically they have the same soil types and drainage patterns and things of that nature, but they have no outside influence from other farm fields. So they stand alone. And they are measuring the surface runoff and then the subsurface tile. And after that first initial crop season or crop rotation, they'll make a management change on one of those fields. And yeah, here you can see some of the treatment practices that they've made. And this is, I guess summarizing it a little bit, but looking at all these things on one of those pairs. So, one pair might be looking at using manure versus commercial fertilizer. The next site is looking at the rate, and on down the list here, tillage, different amendments to the soil. Maybe it's drainage water management or some of these new practices that we'll talk about later, phosphorus removal beds. But basically one practice gets implemented on that field for another crop cycle, so another 2 or 3 years, and then they can compare that information because they'll still have that field that is kind of the control field. So it's getting the same rainfall as the other field, and then they can see when we make this change, what difference did we see in nutrient loss. And ideally, we would see from this in, we could develop some trends and patterns and then make hard recommendations after that. And so that's the information that we try to piggyback off of. 2 of our farms have this treatment equipment on it. The smaller operation, and then the Statler farm, which is the manure livestock operation. So the one more thing on the this is 365 days a year. So it's taking samples. If it's raining, it's taking samples about every 15 minutes. And if it's not raining, water moving, it's gonna take a sample basically every 6 hours, and it's gonna store it in those little white boxes there, and take it to, they come around every week, take it to the lab and analyze it, and then report the information back out. These are very expensive pieces of equipment, $20,000 to $30,000 for each individual box. So there's 4 boxes on each site. So, $100,000 of equipment sitting at one place, and multiply that by 20 sites across Northwest Ohio. So very, very expensive to accomplish this program. So the recommendations here, basically 3 that we try to preach all the time, and there's a lot more behind this that we'll get into on these practices, but kind of high level, every producer needs to think in these 3 buckets as they look at their farm. So following the 4 R's, and I know that's a generic, not a generic, that's a branded term that you've hopefully heard of, but that 4R nutrient management concept is number 1. Looking at how water leaves your farm fields and how you can manage it is kind of almost moving to be to the number 1 on this list as more and more science comes out. Looking at water management plans for your field or in your farm is crucial. And then improving soil health, reducing soil erosion is kind of that 3rd bucket. So if we dive in here to the 4 R's, and if you're not familiar, the 4 R's is the rate, the time, the place, and the source of nutrient application. So if we look in each one of those buckets, we start with rate. And I always start it this way: if you're farming or if you're a nutrient management planner, the first thing that you need on any field is a soil test. I say I'm a young farmer, I've been doing it 10 years now, but it amazes me sometimes to talk to farmers that have been doing it for a while who don't have soil tests that are 10 years, newer than 10 years. And that just shocks me because technology is so much improved nowadays. That information is vital. I'm trying to save every penny I can. And if I don't know what's in my soil, why should I be fertilizing for a crop that I don't know what's already out there? So we looked at the soil testing methods. And if you're not familiar, you can see it on the left side of the screen there. It's probably a little small, but we took one of our demonstration farm fields and tested it 3 different ways. We took one sample and applied that to the whole field, one soil sample. We took a grid test, which every 2.5 acres made that into a subfield, tested within that. And then the last one was a zone soil test. So looking at the topography, yield maps, drainage, things of that nature, creating these zones within the field, and then soil sampling within that zone and treating that zone as a field. And it's amazing what the results came back at. You can see the blown up chart there. If you look in the center, the map column, you can see how much fertilizer was recommended to be applied to that 60-acre field based on those soil samples. So taking one sample told us we needed 12,000 pounds of MAP. Taking the grid sample, we're down to 5,700, and the zone sample, 3,500 pounds. So almost 8,500 pounds difference of fertilizer that we weren't even putting out on the field in general. So obviously an economic savings, but if you're putting that fertilizer maybe in the right spot in the field where it needs it, not where it doesn't need it, stands a better chance of being taken up by the plant and not leached off the site. So I asked the gentleman that did this for us, this was done 5 years ago, And I asked him if he's done this on other fields, and he said yes, and it's the same story. So it seems the more intense data that you start taking off your field, the better picture you have of nutrient applications. And so putting on the right rate, moral of this story is, you know, putting on the correct amount that the field needs, that the crop needs, is step one. Making sure that we're not driving up soil test values. I don't think I actually put part in my presentation here, but you know, soil test values are an indicator of phosphorus loss. So as your soil test phosphorus reading creeps up, you know, into that 100, above 100 pounds per acre range, you start to have a much greater chance to lose that nutrient from the farm field. It's not a direct correlation, but it definitely increases your risk. So keeping those nutrient levels where they need to be is step number one, and that's the easiest one. Going along with that, so you know, that was easy on the VRT side, variable rate fertilizer application, because you know, most guys are applying fertilizer, commercial fertilizer. These two maps that you see here is actually our hog operation, and so they are putting liquid manure out on the field, and they have got to the point over the last 3 years where they can variable rate apply their liquid manure through a tank. And so the map you see on the left is the prescription. So based on the soil samples, that's what they should have been applying. And then the one on the right is what they actually applied with their tank. And it's a little, you know, a lot of hash marks going through it and everything else, but you can see the general colors is they got pretty close to applying what they needed to based on a phosphorus application. And so that's kind of where the technology has taken us, is instead of just blasting your manure out there at a straight rate to get rid of it, now we can start using it at a, you know, using it more wisely, I guess. There's other challenges that come with that when you start variable rate in manure, because you've got, you know, different components of that manure that you're now shorting the crop. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's definitely looking at doing things a little bit better. Second part of the 4 R's is the source. So, you know, you can see you've got obviously livestock, or you've got commercial fertilizer. You know, biosolids is out there a little bit, but typically this is what guys are going to put on. And as I said earlier, livestock's getting the finger pointed squarely at them. And you know, if we don't do it right, you know, it's obviously they can have a bad impact on the environment if they're not spreading it correctly, if they're treating it more as a waste and not as a commodity and a nutrient source. What the research has showed us, though, is that if applied at the correct rate, at the same rate, so if you need 150 pounds of phosphorus applied for that corn crop, that corn soybean rotation, and you apply the correct rate of commercial fertilizer to meet that goal, and the correct rate or the correct rate of livestock manure to meet that goal, the loss amount of phosphorus through the edge of field is exactly the same. So, you know, when applied at appropriate rates, they behave the same within the soil profile. So I think that's important to know, is that, you know, as long as we're not over applying, then we should be good on using either fertilizer source or nutrient source when it comes to feeding our crops. And that's, again, from a public perception standpoint, that's something that is misportrayed in the media. So the third bucket here is time, timing of application. And in my other presentation, I had a lot more bells and whistles. You know, PowerPoint doesn't let you do all those things. But basically, I keep saying everything's important, I feel like, but time is one of those that the timing of application is really crucial as well, because the fact of the matter is that in order for phosphorus to leave your farm field, and even nitrogen to an extent, it needs something to carry it off the field. It needs water. So your soil test values, you know, your source of nutrients, all those things may not matter if you lived in a bubble and the water never left your field. it didn't matter what your soil test is because it's not going to take any nutrients with it. So, you know, the water is the carrier. And so we have to look at when that water falls on the farm field and when it leaves the farm field. And so we looked back at weather data across the state of Ohio, and you can see, I've got my screen's a little blocked here. I got to look at my own charts. So you can see the chart on the upper left is looking at more Northwest Ohio fields, but each one of those vertical bars is a decade there. So you can see 60s all the way up to the 2010s. And then the height of the bars is the number of 1-inch rainfall events in that decade. So you look at Bowling Green there, back in the 60s, we had just over 40 1-inch plus rainfall events in that whole decade. You look in the 2010s in Bowling Green, they're up almost to 80 1-inch rainfall events. And you can see that general trend on all those Northwest Ohio sites, and the rest of Ohio looks just about the same. So rainfall is coming, heavier, more intense, and I think I don't know how many's on here now, but I think if I could see all your faces, you'd probably all be shaking your heads that yes, that seems anecdotally correct. You know, it seems like, gosh, we get a 3-inch rainfall event in 30 minutes, and it seems like we get those a couple times every summer, and the data bears that out. If you look at that on the upper right-hand corner, that's looking at that same information from the left side just by the month. So the orange line is the last 3 decades, I think it is, and the blue line is the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Yeah. So you can see that increase in rain is coming, you know, in April, May, right when we're out in the field putting our nutrients out there. So, and then in the fall again, in August and in September, those numbers are still high. And that is I don't have the town on there. I think that was Salina for that particular one. So it's interesting to look at that information and then have that in the back of your mind of when you put your nutrients out. So if you look at the bottom chart, then that's the Great Miami River rainfall chart, and that stops in 2017, the last time that I saw an update on that. But you know, you've always heard that our rainfall in the Miami River area was about 38.5 inches. That's the average. Well, we haven't been average since 1994. It's been an upward trajectory since then, and so that rainfall pattern is, like I said, going across the state, and that impacts how nutrients leave the farm field. I think, yeah, here see if this works. Cindy, give me is that flowing good? Okay, so that's what it looks like, right, on your farm field. We get these heavy, intense rainfall, and that's driving nutrients downstream. In the Western Basin, they say 70 to 90% of the nutrients come in about 10 rain events throughout the year. So, you know, it's just, you know, blowing through the system with these big rainfall events. You know, I'm not talking about climate change or anything, you know, not getting political on that. It's just the reality that we face. We can do all these things, and you can lose them all in the matter of you know, a big rainfall event. And so it's trying to make your system a little more resilient to that type of weather pattern. I think that the chart, it started in the 60s here, but if we went back to the 50s, I have this all the way back for 100 and some years. If you started in the 50s, I think the 50s was the wettest decade on record until the 2010s. So the 50s was really wet, the 60s was really dry, and then we've kind of been on an upward slope ever since then. So weather patterns change. Who knows where we'll be in 10 more years, but right now, this is where we're at. The last bucket of the 4 R's is placement. And this chart is a little bit old, but it gets the point across. This was a study done with the ARS unit, looking at how your nutrients were placed in the field. So broadcasted, injected, or tilled. And you can see, they say here a 70% reduction in that DRP when that fertilizer is injected or tilled into the soil. Now that number, this was in a, you know, kind of a plot type experiment. When spread out across the bigger field, they still see a pretty good reduction, probably in that 30 to 40% range. So it's not quite as drastic, but that's still one of the main things we can do when we place our nutrients is getting them in contact with the soil. So I don't want to necessarily start tilling on my farm. I mean, I had to do that last year when we tiled a field, and that about made me sick to have to till my field up. So, we've got to find some methods to be able to place these nutrients in an efficient manner. This is the Kellogg farm doing strip tillage. So, placing that nutrient in that band, it's about a 9-inch wide band. That's too much tillage for me even, but for these guys, this works out really well. They save, I don't know if strip tillage is a practice down your way, if it's maybe a little too rolly, but by doing this, you're being more efficient with your nutrients. So these guys and lots of strip tillers will tell you that you save or cut your fertilizer bill by about 1/3. So in this particular instance, the Kellogg's spend $400,000 a year on commercial fertilizer. They knocked about $100,000 off of that by implementing this practice. Obviously, you've got a toolbar here, you've got the tractor, you've got other equipment to make this all work. But if you're being more efficient with your nutrients, and you look at that water quality component of it, this is a good method. Does this translate to smaller operators? A 500-acre farmer isn't going to spend $200,000 on a strip till toolbar and the tractor that needs to pull it. So we're looking at other methods to be able to accomplish this. This is a toolbar that Legacy Cooperative built that is less disturbance. It's just blowing the fertilizer down through those units there, and very minimal disturbance. The problem is you're not covering as much ground as you are when you're broadcasting. Broadcasting costs you $5 an acre, and you're covering, gosh, I don't know how many acres an hour, but quite a bit more than what you can do with this when you're going 10 miles an hour and you're only, 20 feet wide. We have a project that just started this year, kind of a satellite farm of the demonstration farms, where they took H2 Ohio dollars to do subsurface placement. That's one of the big practices that they're pushing. They went out and bought an old air seeder, used air seeder, and converted it into a fertilizer applicator. So, it's got all the units on it, everything that you need. It's just, instead of putting seed down, it's dropping fertilizer. So we're testing that for the next 5 years and looking at the yield data, the economic data coming off of that. And then we're cutting the rate on one of the trials to see if we can match what strip tillers are doing. Is it economically beneficial for us to do this, putting it below ground? It's a 30+ year no-till site, so no tillage no conventional or no rotational tillage, nothing like that. So we want to find that niche for guys that are doing strictly no-till to still do this practice, because the edge of field data is really showing that strictly no-till, when you're broadcasting your fertilizer out on top of the ground, it can be a problem. I hate to admit it, again, being a no-tiller myself, but if you're just putting it out there and you're getting these rain events on top of it, you're losing more of that than if you are incorporating it into the soil with some pieces of tillage equipment. So it's something that we've got to find a tool to be able to accomplish this. Second bucket here is a water management plan, and Cindy, you give me the high sign and we need to wrap it up. So it's been like a year since I gave my presentation, so I just get going. So water management, kind of back to that timing aspect in these increased rainfall events. Water management is starting to rise up the list of something that is more crucial than even those 4R practices. I just saw some data. He actually presented it last September, but they looked at all this edge of field information and started to piece out where the phosphorus was coming from in this information, and when it got to Lake Erie. And his initial findings were that 85% of it was basically legacy phosphorus. So phosphorus that's been out there for decades already. So 15% of it is things that we're doing today, all the things that I just talked about in your field. So that's not a published article yet. I know they're still kind of working through that information, but then it kind of comes back to this water management system. And how do you keep that water in the network of channels and everything else before it gets downstream and into Lake Erie or the Gulf of Mexico? So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And some of these practices fit into that bucket. So drainage water management, is that something that you guys do down there? No? So, it's a practice for more flat areas, right? And, you start getting some rolling topography and these things just aren't, economically viable to stop water within a field. But this is something that they've pushed really hard in the last 10 years in Northwest Ohio. And I've kind of highlighted the drainage structure there on the left, sitting on top of the tile and the tile coming out into the ditch. And then this picture on the right is looking down inside that tile. And you can see those boards kind of at the top of the screen, top of the picture. Those slide up and down tracks, and you can cut off the flow of that tile during portions of the year that you don't want it to be running. Yeah, so we, like I said, I mean, thousands upon thousands of these things have been put out over the last couple of years. The data on it is a little bit wishy-washy. It started out looking really, really good as far as cutting nitrogen rates, because all you're basically doing is holding that water back in the system. That water keeps on going down through the soil profile like God intended it to do, and you're not changing the chemistry of the water. It's just volume. You're just holding volume back. And so it reduces nitrogen, and it really does actually do a really good job on nitrogen. The phosphorus component is a little bit, like I said, wishy-washy, and actually sometimes shows an increase, next time it shows a decrease. So they're a little more hesitant on giving these things the green light from a phosphorus standpoint. Kind of the new innovative part of it, though, is if you look back on this picture on the right, those boards, you'd manually have to slide those up and down to cut off the flow of the water throughout the year. Now they've got an automated system. We've got this at the Statler farm, and I think it's the only one currently in the state of Ohio. And this is, you're looking at what you would see on your iPad or on your desktop computer. It's got a system that we installed inside that drainage structure, and you basically can tell it from anywhere in the world, as long as you have internet, to open or close. And so you can manipulate that water table throughout the growing season. And if you have multiple ones of these, there's guys that have 50 of these structures. Instead of having to go out and raise and lower everyone, you can do that sitting inside the house, and they, within a couple seconds, they lower, or raise. So it's kind of an innovative concept. Again, it's not fit for every site, but something that gets a lot of attention. The next one, this one might be familiar with what your guys' landscape looks like. So a blind inlet. So the picture on the left is something that you probably see, a riser out in the middle of a field somewhere taking in surface water. And what we found is the best filter for these nutrients is soil. If we can get that water to go down through the soil, it's going to bind on to a lot of nutrients and keep them from flowing downstream. You put one of these things in there, and it basically short circuits that. All that water that's ponded in the field is going right down the tile, right? It's a direct conduit to the ditch. They're put in for a reason, right? You don't want your crop to fail. You're trying to be productive in areas of the field. And so they've developed a blind inlet, which is the picture on the right. And basically you come in, you take out that surface riser, you put in a web of pipe, 3 feet down or so. You backfill it with gravel, geotextile fabric usually, different layers of material, and then you grade it flush with the ground, and you can farm over it, somewhat farm over it, but it breaks that cycle. So that water is forced to go down through that profile before it gets into the network of pipes and into your drainage tile. This is a little bit of old data, but it's still pretty relevant. looking at the reductions from these blind inlets versus a tile riser. And if you focus on all of them, really are pretty drastic reductions. You see a little increase there in nitrates. That was a management error, I think, on some fertilizer applications. But again, breaking that cycle of water and keeping it from growing directly to the ditch makes a difference. So kind of the next component of that is these phosphorus removal beds. And this would be a practice that you would want to install if you had a field that had really elevated soil test levels. So, back to what I said earlier, that it's not a direct correlation, but the higher your soil test phosphorus level, the more likely you are to lose that phosphorus. So if there's nothing else you can do in that field, management practice wise, you stop applying fertilizer because you don't need it. You're in that drawdown. The crops are removing the phosphorus, but it's going to take decades to pull that phosphorus out of the soil. This might be a practice that fits. The picture on the right is kind of the first generation of these phosphorus beds. This is one we did at the Kurt farm, and basically, you're intercepting the tile. You are putting in this web of PVC pipe where the water comes in. You're backfilling with a material, they call it a phosphorus sorption material, basically a material that has an affinity to bind nutrients to it, so a negative or a different charge than what the phosphorus has. That water comes in, it interacts with that material, phosphorus is bound to it, and then the water has an outlet channel. I got to move my screen a little bit. So the bottom of that picture is actually the two-stage ditch that we'll talk about here in a minute. But so that water reaches a certain level, and then it's allowed to flow out of that system. That's a pretty big and expensive system. I think that's like a 40 by 20 area. You've got many tons of phosphorus material, removal material in there, kind of back of the farm. How feasible is it? That one costs probably about $15,000-$20,000 to do. Has a certain lifespan, so you have to come in and regenerate it, take stuff out, put new stuff back in. That, like I said, first generation. Third generation is the picture on the left. So we've gone from this 20 by 40 box to this basically septic system tank. And you can see there that it's and the picture on the bottom right is kind of a schematic of what that looks like or how it functions. So the water comes in. I'm trying to look at the schematic myself because they kind of flipped them around how they used to do them. But that water comes in and it has to go through that material, and then it has the opportunity to leave that box, that chamber, and go downstream once it's been treated. The material they're using now is much more effective, I guess would be the right word. So you can use a lot less of it. The beauty of this system that they've got now is that instead of having to come in and take all that material out and dispose of it, they can come in with a tank of water and basically flush it and capture what it removes the nitrogen or the phosphorus from those particles. It releases it. They can grab it on the backside, and then that material is kind of regenerated and it's ready to go again for a certain lifespan. And so that's a new practice that is starting to gain some steam. I think NRCS actually has a standard for it now. We've got a couple of these on the demo farms. They're really starting to push these out. It's a practice to solve a certain problem within your field. It's not something that you just put on every drainage outlet because it's not going to be feasible to do. Next practice is a two-stage ditch. And so I don't know I don't know what it looks like down there for you guys, but up in Northwest Ohio, we've got a lot of drainage ditches, a lot of county maintenance, things of that nature. And what you end up seeing is a lot of this, banks falling in, you come in, you dip it out, that vicious cycle of trying to keep the thing clean. And so they looked at a different ditch design, the two-stage channel, and you can see that the difference between the two channels is that bench on that two-stage ditch. And basically what that allows the water to do is, as you get those high velocities and high flows, that water comes up and it spreads out across that bench. And when it spreads out, it slows down and it drops out sediment, and has a denitrifying effect when that water interacts with the plant material and vegetation. So this is one practice that is monitored by the Edge of Field Research Network. I haven't seen any data out of it officially yet on what they're finding, but I know on the Kurt farm, they did implement this practice back in 2013, I think, 2014. And we did some studies just on aquatics. You know, the health of the stream was so much better in the two-stage channel than right upstream and right downstream where we had a traditional channel. Again, that more things living in it, just much better quality of water there. So this is a practice that, again, it's got its place. It's got to be a certain engineering standards, certain flow rate, all that kind of stuff. But a practice that stands to have some merit. The oldest one of these is 20 plus years old now. And to my knowledge, they have not had any maintenance on it. So they're not going in and dipping it out. They're spraying it to keep the trees off of it, but they don't have to dip it out. So there's that savings there of from a taxpayer standpoint as well. Last couple of practices here fall into that erosion, soil health bucket. This is the picture that I showed you before at the start of the presentation, kind of that black and white picture. This was the erosion pattern that was going across that field, and there's that picture there after they fixed the grass waterways. So, you know, the bread and butter of soil and water, right? Putting in grass waterways, that's what they've been doing for the last however many years. But again, this is a practice that's keeping that sediment from getting downstream. And I should say it's, you know, it's not changing anything as far as chemistry in the or nutrient components, things of that nature. It's basically you're stopping that erosion in that point of where that gully's forming. Cover crops. It was mentioned earlier that you guys are having a workshop on cover crops, and I want to be clear on this one because I've been accused of saying things that I haven't said. So this is my particular farm. I just happened to capture this picture, and you can see the difference in the water coming off this field. The water, you can see the chocolate milk looking stuff, that's coming off a field that didn't have cover crops on it. The other one on the left side there, coming down the side ditch, is pretty clear, and that was a field that had cover crops on it. And then you can see the grab samples of the water from those fields, and this visually the difference. What we're seeing from the Edge of Field Research Network is that cover crops can have a significant impact on nitrogen. Phosphorus is the jury's still out, and I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear, especially in Northwest Ohio, where there's been a lot of money spent to get cover crops out to improve the lake. It's one of those things that I'll get to this in a couple slides here, but looking at what you're trying to solve the problem, you know, what's your problem? How are you going to solve it? Cover crops is going to be great for a lot of things. Soil health components, right? You're keeping your soil in place so that there is a sediment bound P portion of that. Improving infiltration, increasing organic matter. Those things are really good. Nitrate loss, as you can see in this chart here. This was a corn silage field, I believe, where they applied cereal rye there in late August, and you can see the nitrate reductions on the top graph. That was where the cover crop was applied. You can see nitrates basically flatlined after that. The bottom graph, it was not applied, so no cover crop, and you can see that they still had loss from that field, about a 90% reduction of nitrates. That's a good thing. DRP was basically stayed the same, so no real impact. and they've seen that on a couple other sites. There's some reduction sometimes, but the researchers tell you that it's not statistically valid. So that's, you know, it's one of those that people don't like to hear, and I've been accused of saying that I don't like cover crops, or cover crops shouldn't be planted, and that's the furthest thing from the truth, because I plant them on my own farm. I think it's just one of those things that we have to realize isn't going to solve the problem that we think it's going to solve. So the picture on the right is the Kellogg demonstration farm doing cover crops and strip tillage. So again, and I didn't say this, I guess, from the get-go, what we're trying to do is build that system of practices that's going to have the most bang for the buck. So combining practices, stacking them on top of each other. And so here the Kellogg's, I think this was after wheat, they planted a cover crop, they had nice growth on it, and then they came in and they put their fertilizer below ground in a standing cover crop. That's, you know, you can't hardly do it any better than that, because any nitrates that would be subject to loss, you know, those cover crops are going to grab onto. From a phosphorus standpoint, you're putting it below ground, and you've got cover out there. It's a nice system. So those are the three high-level recommendations: following the 4 R's, having that water management plan, and improving soil health and reducing soil erosion. I mentioned this a couple times, and something that I've been beat over the head about with the research community is, you know, taking a step back and looking at what your actual resource concern is. If you have a farm field that is, you know, your soil test phosphorus rates are within the ranges, they're pretty low, and you're not close to a stream, you know, you don't have a direct conduit going to the stream, you may not need to do certain practices. You know, they don't make sense for you to do. And so they want you to take a step back and look at your individual fields and say, okay, where's my risk, and what practices are going to be the most bang for the buck to eliminate that risk or reduce that risk. It may be just the simple things of how you're applying your nutrients. If you've got a field that's got really elevated phosphorus, maybe it's that phosphorus filter bed, changing up your crop rotation where you're removing more vegetation and driving those phosphorus levels down. So it's those type of things. And as I said, also, you know, 85% of this might just be stuff that's already in the creek beds and getting churned up as these big rainfalls come through, and there might not be a darn thing we can do about it. And that's kind of where things are starting to go a little bit, and it's a little scary, I guess, because we've been doing all this work and it may not pay off for another 30, 40 years. And that's not what the environmental community wants to hear. And so you got to kind of play both sides of it. Just to wrap up here, so I like this picture because in Northwest Ohio, it's not as bad. I'm sure down your guys' way, you got a little more urban sprawl, but you know, the people on the left are going to continue to tell the people on the right how you will farm, whether you like it or not. That's, you know, we live in Ohio. You know, we are not a rural state by any means anymore. We've got people everywhere, and so that's just the pressure that we're going to live under, and we've got to figure out a way to you know, do our part to help reduce some of these things. H2 Ohio is one of those programs where it's kind of that bridge. You know, it's not hitting you over the head yet with it. It's a voluntary program, but if you don't sign up for it, you know, in 10 years, this might not be a voluntary program anymore. So I think H2 Ohio, at least, I hope it goes statewide eventually, but it gives you the opportunity to get these practices figured out and paid for, and hopefully you've got it all figured out by the time the mandates come in however many years. Edge of field monitoring. We've got, as I mentioned earlier, that system is really expensive, and it's got some limitations. You can only do so much with the money you've got, and capture. You can only monitor so many fields, and everybody always says, well, what about this? You know, what about this situation? What about my situation? So we've got a couple of systems on our demo farms that are lower cost. Gentleman out of Wisconsin, his idea is basically to take this information or this technology and get it down to where it might only cost you $1,000 for a system, and it's mobile. You can set it at the edge of your field for a certain time frame, collect the information yourself, get a reading of what your farm field is actually doing, what your management system is doing, and then make changes based on that, and not have to be reliant on this bigger research set to, potentially not give you any answers. So that's something that we're testing in conjunction with this expensive equipment, and right now looks pretty promising that the data is relatively similar, that it's going to be within those margins of error that you could feel comfortable that, yeah, I'm doing things right, or I've got a problem here. Saturated buffer site. This is again one of those practices about breaking that water flow. This is actually in Grand Lake St. Mary's watershed, so it's a project that we funded from the demo farms because we had to find a site to do it, and they had a good site and the monitoring to go with it. But again, what this is you can see the gray line coming in there. That's the field tile coming out of the field. It hits a drainage control structure, or the drainage water management structure, and then we've got water or tile that's rerouted along the buffer strip, along the open ditch there. You can see kind of in the actual picture itself, that yellow line is where the saturated buffer, or the tile, is running parallel to the stream. So instead of that water going right into the stream, it's redirected subsurfacely, and then it has to basically gravity flow into the surface water, going through the soil again. So again, soil is the best thing that's going to grab up that nutrient, and this is one way that they're looking at doing it. This is, again, I say it on every practice, but not made for every site. Different engineering parameters that have to go into this, but it looks like it's pretty promising again on nitrogen. Phosphorus is, again, that kind of harder one to wrap our arms around. Looking at livestock, I mentioned that 85% number about legacy phosphorus. Within that same research article, or I guess presentation, was that all these things that we're doing today may not make a big difference, except liquid manure application. That one kind of rises to the top of that. When you have that liquid manure application on the field and you're not incorporating it, you're just putting it out on top, that we see a decent DRP loss from that field. And so one of the issues we have up here north, especially Grand Lake St. Mary's, but even further north, is how do we get this valuable resource of manure spread out on more fields? And so it all comes down to trucking. It costs money to move a lot of water that's in the manure. So if we can get the water out of it and have the nutrients be loaded into that more of that sludge material, then you can put it on a dump truck. You can haul it somewhere further away from the house, similar to chicken litter. Chicken litter can be trucked all over the place because it's a dry material. So this process that we did at the demonstration farms is the left side is the cake coming out of the liquid hog manure. The middle pictures are kind of they put different liming agents within that waste stream, that water, and it basically settles out different amounts of material. And then that last picture on the right is, I forget the name of it now. It's a calcium phosphorus fertilizer. I forget the correct term for it, but basically you've got a product on the left that is nutrient dense and drier. You can ship it. You've got a product on the right that is completely dry that you could sell potentially, and then you've got the liquid stream left that basically has nothing left in it, maybe a little bit of nitrate that maybe you can irrigate on your growing crops, or you can do something else within your farm operation. So it's again, coming down to economics. If we can get this to be economically viable, I think this will go a long way too in the animal agriculture, getting the finger of blame pointed at them. And then I put this picture up here. This is a guy that I follow on Twitter, and Jason Mock is his name. But you know, guys that are doing innovative things, you know, growing crops a different way, you know, that's the wave to the future, I think. You know, we're always changing, always making improvements. And can we improve how we utilize nutrients on our farm? You know, think outside the box. You don't have to do it the same way. Lots of guys are doing grazing of livestock again. Kind of what's old is new again. And I think that's where we're going to go in this space. So I saw a couple of things pop up. I don't know if those were questions, Dylan.
So we don't currently have any questions, but we'll take any now if you have any. I just want to, say thank you to Aaron, because these are some of the practices that we're looking at potentially. I think some of the comments that you made, Aaron, specifically with making your farm resilient, into the future is important, and what works on your farm and looking at that very specifically for each farm is important. And, I recently sat through a presentation where you showed that picture of the chocolate milk, the topsoil that's being lost. And there was a farmer on that presentation that said, I want to keep my farm on my farm. And so that really resonated with me, that, some of these practices are going to help you do that. So again, thank you, Aaron, for providing this presentation this morning, and see if we have any questions through the chat. Please ask away. After COVID lifts, we'd love to have a tour up your way, Aaron, if that's a possibility. And I know Dylan has taken part in a tour, I think a year ago or something like that, and probably a year and a half ago.
About a year and a half ago, yeah.
But found it very interesting. So that may be coming in the future.
Yeah, we get all the time that when non-farm groups come through, they say, yeah, but nobody else is doing this stuff. These farmers are special because you guys are having people come through here, but they're not doing anything really, really special. I think that's what we've learned after 5 years, is that a lot of these things are, yeah, there's some innovative stuff, but a lot of these things farmers are doing and they just keep quiet about. They don't share with anybody what they're doing. These guys are just willing to share their farms with us and economics with us. They give it to us all, or give it all to us. So that's kind of nice.
Yes. Well, we haven't gotten anything, so.
Well, I think we can't see their faces, so they're probably sleeping.
No. Again, thank you. If anybody does have questions, certainly reach out to us afterwards, and we can certainly pass that on to Aaron and get the questions answered. But again, we appreciate your time this morning, Aaron, and Ashley and Warren County Farm Bureau. Thank you for sponsoring this today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Everyone.